Okay. Hello, which one?
Go green.
Hello. Oh, it's great. I'm Fred Spanis, along with Jess. I'm a consultant to the South Central Continuum of Care. And today I'm going to introduce our trainer, Mary Garrison. Mary is currently the CEO and president of Heritage Behavioral Health Center in Decatur. Some of you might remember that Mary did a presentation for us some years ago it was at Litchfield, I think, at the Lakeland facility in Litchfield. Anybody was there?
I was.
I was. And at that time, Mary was a professor of social work at Millikan University. She's also a licensed clinical social worker.
Yeah.
And many other things. I think you're really gonna enjoy what Mary has to give us today. Mary.
Well, thank you, Fred. I'm gonna test this out a minute. Hold on. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Do I need a microphone? No. Okay, I kind of like to dance. All right. Well, thank you. And this has kind of been a long time coming. I had to regroup in May when this was going to happen. I had foot surgery, hence why I'm wearing tennis shoes these days. I went 5 months of recovery. It was a long road, but here we are. And so I was reflecting back to doing this training before, and I remembered we had some students of mine that came as well. And so I have worked with Fred for many, many years in the Decatur community, Macon County, working when I was a professor in particular around homeless research and doing the point in time survey. I think I did those for 10 years. And as Fred was probably trying to move away from writing the HUD grant every year, I'm like, Fred, I'm out, I'm going to do this new job and I can't do it. So I left him high and dry and I apologize. But in my new role, I've been at Heritage, this starting my 3rd year. We have a lot of programs that serve individuals who experience homelessness and housing insecurity. So I still sit on our continuum of care, and we have a pretty unique program in our community called Oasis Day Center that is under the umbrella of our organization that allows folks to get IDs, use it as a place for their mail to come, phone calls, all those kinds of things, showers. And so we're really proud of that. We've had that for 25 years. And so today I've been excited because I'm like, I'm taking a personal day and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to really engage with this. And this is what I did a lot of when I was at Millikan University. So we've got a lot to cover. And feel free, get something to drink, get something to eat, go to the restroom. If I look like you're really glazed over, we'll take a 5-minute break. But I want to capitalize on the couple hours we have before lunch, and then we're going to do the dreaded kind of group work afterward. As my students always couldn't stand that, but we're going to make you work together and figure out some things. So let me get started, and please feel free to ask questions. This is very casual, okay? I mean, I feel like I'm back in the classroom. So again, welcome and introductions. So Fred, thank you for doing that. Jessica, thank you for, again, your patience and getting this together. And I want to talk a little bit about the understanding of today's why. We're going to focus on qualities and skills. We're going to have lunch, and then we're going to do that practical application. So one of the things I always think about, and it resonates too with the staff that I have in my organization. I have about almost 350 staff now, is in the thick of things. I think it's really important to understand why we do what we do. You guys make a choice to do this really difficult work. And so there's something there motivating you, right? And obviously, there's a purpose to this. And so a lot of folks say, I want to help others, and that makes a lot of sense, right? But as we dig down into what that really means, I think there's more to that. There's more nuance to that. We believe that help is possible for the folks that we're serving, right? That they we can do this, and that we intrinsically have something we can provide to them as an individual, right? And that it's good to help other people. Because again, there's a lot of other options, as I've told my students over the years. You know, you're not gonna be a millionaire working in this field. You will be very rich in terms of how you feel and what you're doing and what you're giving back and the impact you have on lives. And so I said, the students always got that, but the parents were always like, quit telling my student, you know, my child to go into the human service profession or social work, because I want them to be able to have a good life. And I'm like, you can really have a good life. And so I think it's important to think about that when we talk about helping others, because that's the number one. If I did a survey, that's the number one response that I would get. And it really resonates that to help others means that people, again, can grow and can change. However that looks for them, and we're here to do that, and we're willing to do that, even though sometimes it's incredibly, incredibly hard and frustrating, because we'll talk about problem solving in a while, but I always say I can solve your problem in 30 seconds. But that's not, I shouldn't be doing that, because I've solved your problem my way and how I want to do it, and it has nothing to do with you. And so as a social worker, I've had to battle that for 30 years to say, okay, I want to fix this. I'm going to step back, and for what I'm thinking in my mind about fixing it, how can I support the individual in front of me? So I think another kind of motivation is to save people from some sort of harm. When we see people in pain, I think most humans are struck by that. Oh my gosh. But I do think there's a special group, and you're in that's why you do the work, because it's just like, I have to do something because I can't see them in pain. And so it triggers us a desire to help, if you will. We have that empathy for folks that is really important, one of those qualities. And even kind of resonates with pain of our own, potentially, when we might have had that pain and potentially been in danger. And so again, it comes back to, if we're looking at saving people, it's possible to relieve pain and suffering. We can be a part of that journey with individuals. And the knowledge you have, because we know helping people and saving people that's a kind of a trigger word for me. It's and how we look at it, because we're not here to save people, but we are here to help them through what experiences they have, right? That danger and that pain. But I think about the knowledge base you have in order to do that. It's just not, I mean, we can do a lot for people without knowing all the technical things we're going to talk about today. You have special qualities and skills that you bring in order to help relieve that pain, folks. And again, that's why you're here. And I think in our minds, we think, I hope, that individuals who are suffering, when they're ready, they want help. They're going to come to us for that. And so here we are doing that. And so the other, again, there's some becauses. I can't stand to see other people suffering. We just talked about that. People always turn to me for help. That is a typically, it seems natural. And I'm guessing in this room, you've probably been in that, like wherever, when you were little, right? People said, oh, I'm going to go talk to this person. I'm going to talk to Mary. And there's some trust or bond that they have. And so you turn that into, then it becomes a motivation with these other pieces too. And I think a lot of people are motivated because they had such a hard time themselves and no one was there. So you know what, I'm not going to let you go through something and not have some kind of support from a person. So I want to be on that journey with you. And then on the flip side, you did have someone there and they were a great support to you. And you realize the value of that I might be able to give back in that way, right? And so I think in your minds, going back and thinking about why are you motivated to be here? Anybody want to share? I'm an interactive professor. What started your motivation? Has it changed? Has it stayed true? And I'm also really good at being quiet and I cannot wait it out. There you go.
I just knew I always wanted to work with people. I didn't want to work with paper. I didn't want to work with, ideas, objects, kinds of things. And this is perfect though, because it's a little bit of people, a little bit of paper, and it's a nice variety.
Because 100% can be rough with people.
Yeah,
It's a lot
yeah.
to take on, yeah.
It's just a nice variety, and you know, in the end of the day, if you help one person, yay.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you.
I was homeless at one point in time when I had my kids and they were younger. And I don't think that there were programs like this out there back then. I've also been an addict. I've been a victim of domestic violence. And I've always, when I was raising my kids, I took in their friends that didn't have a good home life. So I've always been kind of doing,
Yeah,
you know, helping other people. Because I
absolutely.
know what it's like not to have help. I didn't have a very good family support system, so.
So that's where you fit in here, right? Your difficult times and your experiences. Thank you for sharing about your lived experience, and that has so much value in the work that happens, right? And being able to, again, walk alongside, we all are, but having a different perspective. Absolutely. Anybody else?
I can share mine.
Please.
My son was diagnosed with autism when he was 2. And he still lives with us, but by doing this, I'm learning a lot, even to help him and to pay it forward. So when I'm gone, I can get him set up for his future and hope that somebody will be there to help him when I'm not here.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and that's thinking about that when we aren't here, when you're not here, how he will be able to thrive, right? And be able to do that. Thank you. All right.
Oh, sure, mine.
Oh, Fred, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've been working one way or the other in not-for-profit and then as a consultant for, I guess 50 years, you know, community organizing, nonprofit sector. Mine's a little bit different. I could not stand to see people taken advantage of because they had no power in a relationship. And it just pissed me off, you know, wasn't so much love for people who were suffering, it was distaste for those who took advantage. I'm like the person who, if a person treats a server bad in a restaurant, I get pissed. They're just doing it because they can. I see some heads nodding. That's a strange motivation, but that's really what got me into it. I couldn't stand it.
Right, well, somebody needs to step
Yeah,
up and
yeah.
help, right, and know that that's not okay.
Well, sometimes people who have, I'm a white, you know, heterosexual male, I have some inherent power. And sometimes I can use that power on behalf of people who aren't gonna be listened to.
Yeah, for good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fred.
That's it.
Yeah.
You like it?
So I'm gonna move to qualities and skills, but before that, I wanted to talk about the power of relationships, and this is where my motivation is. Kind of a combination of things, what I think I've heard here. Being an advocate, I knew early on in my career, well, I wanted to be a nurse. And then I realized, no way could I, I'm not that smart. And so, but I always had done things like I was what in the old days we called the candy striper at the hospital. I just did all of those things and I think I did it maybe selfishly because of the relationships. I just love people. I love connecting with people and then seeing how just the relationship that builds from there. And so I believe that everything we do personally and professionally is based upon a relationship. For us to be successful in our work, we have to have a relationship with the individuals we're serving, with each other. And so there builds trust because of the qualities you bring to the table and also because of the skill set. And so how do you do that? I mean, we all have relationships, but focusing on the work. And I could speak, I'm thinking about the things, how you probably interact with your individuals and the things you need to get done, right? We need to help people, we need to get them, we need to get services. And I see that with my staff. And so sometimes that relationship isn't fostered as much as it needs to be in the beginning. And that's not because someone's not trying, but it's like, we're just trying to get someone help. We're trying to get them what they need. And you have to balance that with actually creating that relationship to build that trust. And so building that rapport. You can do that by your genuine interest, which I know you do, your care and compassion. We also need to take time to learn the stories and the backgrounds of the individual we serve. And sometimes we may not think we have time to do that. Like, chop, chop, I gotta get this going. I gotta get you. And, you know, we have what's called a behavioral health urgent care hub where we have people come in and we're doing brief intakes, getting them to where they need to be. And I'm like, that's great. Can you remember their last name? Do you know anything about them? Right, beyond, I'm struggling with my mental health or my substance use. No, we didn't know they had a dog. I mean, there's certain things you could do to start get that done, but say, I know a little bit about that person. Because those are the things that build trust. And it takes, you know, I think one of the things I love about my job is I know I've been in the community a long time. I know a lot of the individuals we serve. I get nothing, I feel like I get nothing done all day. Because I'm just walking around or I walk in the building and clients are talking to me and I'll just stop. And we'll talk because they need that. And then they move along and then sometimes they don't talk. You're like, hey, how are you? And they move along. But I'm trying to foster those relationships. I'm also trying to model for my staff that, yes, we have a meeting at 10. You know what, I'm gonna be a little late for that because I'm not gonna not talk to you when, in that we just may say hi one day, but someday you might want to say, hey, can I talk to you? Sure, absolutely. I put parameters around that. I listen for a minute. I say, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go to this meeting. I'm gonna connect with you in a little bit, right? And so it's not all or nothing, but it's making sure that we're connecting in that way. Think also with the individuals we serve, using humor, compliments. Sometimes with our hardest individuals that are really struggling, it's hard to, okay, what am I finding here? How can I connect to that person when they're not being very nice, right? I always separate it that it's just a behavior. It's not about me. It has nothing to do with me. So how can I reframe that and say, you're having a tough day. So what can we do? How can I support you, right? And so, and celebrating those achievements and progress. And again, I am confident that you are trying to do that. But again, I think it's taking a step back to think about what it looks like on a daily basis. Because again, you have a lot of demands in front of you. And you're trying to get these things accomplished. One of the things that I often hear from clients is, thanks for listening. I mean, they could be furious. And then they're like, okay. Thanks for listening. I'm like, yeah, okay. So we got a plan now? We're good. And so if, again, that minute to 2 minutes changed everything about that. And then they're gonna trust potentially what I'm gonna say. Here, I want you to connect with Ashley and I want you to do these things. So you come back and let's do this now. And I also try to do it, not get into the weeds, because I don't know anything about these clients and the CEO is not gonna run around and I don't wanna go against my staff. They're doing great work, but it's just, again, trying to foster then those relationships that they have with the staff as well. And so again, when you think about relationships, I put this intentionally, right? Up here is it's about trust, it's about believing, it's about community, being loyal, having intuition. You guys are at, I think, the best place to be able to help, you know, the connections you're making, to have them be successful.
Regarding your back debt.
Oh, Fred, normally when students in my class have a cell phone, I hate that. So the other piece about relationships is that folks we're working with is understanding their challenges, right? We know that whether we have lived experience or not, with lived experience, we know it, that the trauma and the experiences that folks are having affects them physically, mentally, and emotionally. Barriers, right? Fred's talking about those voices that cannot be heard, stigma, discrimination, fraught with having potential addiction issues, mental health concerns, lack of resources. That's a lot for us to take on to help someone. But we have to have a sense of what that really looks like when we're working with folks. And so understanding from, I think, former individuals you serve, current, of how what you've learned from their stories and how it might impact another person. And we need to, talking about, well, it fits with that housing first model too, but I just think about resilience that, someone walks in and like actually came back to meet you the next day. That's huge. That's a success. You've done incredible work there. I think we focus a lot on, well, he didn't show up or, missed again. Like I can easily, I remember early in my career, I'm like, okay, we're ready. We've done it. They've come back and they've engaged. And then I was really angry when they didn't continue and didn't pay attention to like why that might have happened. Bless you. And so really trying to just give grace and say, okay, well, let's pick back up and let's do this. Maybe my motivation for change, as if I were an individual being served, happened to change for a reason. So now I'm not as motivated. I'm back kind of really contemplating that. And so I think really understanding those challenges. And then, as I know you do, provide client-centered services, right? So this is where I say, I can solve your problem. We need to provide services tailored to the person. Sometimes our system says all individuals experiencing homelessness need this. We know that. Well, I mean, they need housing. We know that. There you go. But what that means for someone, all of you in the room is very, very different, and how you get there. So knowing those things that might be similar across the folks that we're serving, but really looking at their goals and their preferences as opposed to what I want them to have, right? I would like you to get housing. And we have folks who in our community who he said, I don't know that I ever want to have housing. And that's hard to believe. Okay, so then we work through that. What does that look like? So how can we support you in that? It makes me concerned for danger, but how can we help support you with that so you are safe at night and all of those kinds of things? Not pushing our agenda on them. So involving individuals you're serving in the decision-making process and respecting their choices and autonomy. One of the things that can be difficult, and you brought this up about domestic violence, when you think about substance use or mental health, we want folks to get out of those situations. We want folks to take their medicine, to stop connecting with the people who are not supportive of sobriety. And we have to just be in it with them and say, I'm glad you're here today. What can we do? How can I support you? I think sometimes our hurt that we do to individuals we serve comes from complete goodness. We just want to, again, save you. But that relationship is gonna get much worse if we do that, right? And so, again, it's all about the power of relationships. So helping through their lens is really important. So I also just want to acknowledge and say thank you for what you do. And I know that it's not shallow at all. I mean, I think we get that a lot in the agency, you're doing great work, and then I hope to educate people on what it really means. And that's what you have a voice to. And so, but that you choose to work in this field and to support individuals is wonderful. So glad to have you be a part of the family. So, just gotta make sure time. Now we have till noon, right?
The 11:30 for.
Perfect. That's fine. No worries.
I think it's set up.
Okay. So one of the things that when you're thinking about the helping professions, there are just some qualities that kind of go along with who we are as helpers, right? And somehow we've got these. And I think you have to have patience. It's hard to teach. It's hard to teach compassion. Hard to teach. I think those are just things that are a part of us. And so when I think about, these are just a few, but I think there's some of the, like the top, that top 6, right? That every day we're living these qualities and we're working with folks and impacting lives. So out of these, or if there's another one that you have, what does anything stick out to you for you as a quality and what it means for you? Does it resonate? Yeah.
I just think patience is a really, really, really good key every day. Because so many things are outside of your control. And you just have to be patient.
Yeah.
And it helps because there's no reason to get your blood pressure up or
Right.
get worked up about things because it's just a very up and down, you know,
It is not, it's a marathon, right? It is not a day, a 5K. It's, this is
Yeah.
takes a long time. You have long-standing relationships with folks, right? And yeah, that patience is
yeah.
key.
And to realize what all they are coming to you with, that, you know, they've been challenged with so much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Think compassion,
Mhm.
because I really think if we don't have. Human balance and compassion, I don't think we can do this.
I agree. Mhm.
You have to have feelings for other people,
You do. Right.
whether you're able to do it or not,
Mhm.
you gotta have something there.
What does compassion look like? How does that play out in your daily work?
Me, I think it's, they know that they can come to you as you. You have a connection.
Mhm.
Judgmental.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So just yesterday, I came back to the office and I said, I don't know if I was blessed with or cursed with empathy.
Mhm.
I seem to care and they don't. So it's, how do you balance that? And like I said, I don't know if I'm blessed or cursed with it, but sometimes empathy is not my friend.
Mhm. And when you say they don't, the individual you're serving?
Yeah.
Mhm. Why do you think that now I'm getting all social work on you. Why do you think that they don't?
Because the individual that I served yesterday was severely mentally disabled.
Okay.
And he did not have the capacity
Capacity, right? Mhm.
to do that. And I see that and I want to help him so much. But there's a line there. You have to be really careful because he gets really angry and shuts you out. So
Mhm.
I have to be real careful with him.
Right,
And yeah, yesterday was not a fun day.
that's good insight, yeah. I mean, because you're right, you can harm the relationship. And you can, I mean, it's frustrating because of the end goal here is what we're trying to do. That's why it's that journey. I appreciate that, hearing that.
I think hope,
Mhm.
because without hope, you don't see a light.
Right. And folks are coming to you without hope, right?
Right.
And so,
Or they are coming with hope,
right,
and you might let that hope down.
good,
They might think
good,
you
that's a
actually
great
have the answer,
point. Yeah,
because things take time.
that's a
patience.
great point, yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes there is this expectation that things will happen right away, right? And, I mean, if I were experiencing that, I would want things to happen right away and maybe be demanding. But yeah, that was great, the hope that is there. How do we keep that alive, or how do we instill it if they didn't bring it? And what are their expectations, right? Because I believe you can't, without hope, yeah, what are we able to do? Anything else?
I think resilience, because we have to share a little bit of resilience with our clients whenever it's harder to get them housed. We have to share our resilience to keep moving. We also have to have resilience to show up every day,
Yes.
especially after hard days. I mean, working
Yeah.
with tough clients, it's hard.
It
but
is.
to show up every day and do it.
Mhm.
You have to have that resilience to share and to keep for yourself.
And I think that resilience is because you have empathy, patience, compassion, right, and hope. So
Right.
all of these really tie together. I mean, you've kind of woven this, really well together. And that's why, again, we could pick more, but I feel like, these are all great points. It keeps us going and says that hope brings you into the office again, because we can start it even though that day was. And it's okay to have it, to be frustrated and like, oh, you have to work through that, right? And get support, from each other. I always told my students that, we talked a lot of all the qualities of being a social worker, all those kinds of things, but that I hope that if they come to my funeral, over 17 years of teaching a lot of students, that somebody would be saying something about integrity. And that I hope that I am doing whatever I do, whatever role I've been in, but I'm doing it with integrity. So that, because again, I think for me, it keys into all of these things.
And if you have integrity, then it's gonna help them build dignity.
Absolutely. Yeah. So they said they would come to my funeral and then someone would say something. So probably out of a lot of students, somebody's gonna say something, you know. Maybe they'll require it on my tombstone, I don't know. But for me, it's really, really important, as I look at that. And again, we're all gonna have a bit of one that rises a bit than the other. But I think you cannot talk about these individually without seeing them connected, so. All right. Skills. We're gonna just kind of go over these 6 different skills, and this is a lot of information in a short time. I'm always willing to do longer ones on one of these, if you will, because each one of these could easily be an hour presentation. Don't worry, I'm not gonna be here for 6 hours just on these. But I wanted to highlight some things that I know I've done some trainings in Macon County with some of our providers with these over the years, and they found them helpful as well. And again, I think these are not things that you don't know. But I think they're incredibly important reminders, because we can get kind of, again, in the weeds and forget sometimes with all the things you have going on of what's important. And so it's not like you're a 101 course. You know, you have a lot of things you're bringing and you know this, but I think having discussions of the challenges you face every day with some of these skills and how to carry those out are important. I used to spend a lot of time presenting on ethics in social work. One of the hardest things to do is tell a bunch of social workers who have to follow a code of ethics, you know, remind them of what they need to be doing. And I'm no better than they are, and like why it's important. They're like, we get it. Well, once we got into the discussion, we forget about all the nuances that are related to that and what we're facing. So these are a lot of reminders. So I want to first talk about safeguarding confidentiality. So confidentiality, we would define it as the right of a client to have communication, spoken or written, in confidence, not to be disclosed outside of parties without implied or expressed authorization. Technical term, right? Confidentiality is the foundation of a helping relationship. We're talking about relationships. If you've ever heard, we've all said to someone, Fred, I don't want to tell anybody this, so I'm going to tell you this. Later, Jessica says something, and I'm like, oh, I told you not to do that, right? And so done, I'm not telling Fred anything anymore, right? And he may have, for some reason, thought he, like, out of goodness of us, like, not to say, I'm gonna share Mary's secret, but maybe I can talk to this person. I mean, we're gonna have to talk about information, but even at our work, I'm like, I've gotten a phone call, and here's the topic. And I need to talk about it. I don't give who the name is. I don't talk about who the staff member is. I'm like, until I get more information. And so again, this is where, you know, it's about privacy. Our information is our information. And that's where I think that sometimes that power imbalance comes into play, and where you're probably seeing folks who've been completely discarded in their confidentiality and privacy. So why would I trust you? Because that guy did it before. So what are you going to do differently? And we can say this is confidential. The words you can say, but it's your actions and how you do that. I think making sure that you help individuals that you're serving say you have a right to share this information. I do not. I will not, unless you tell me I can. And then we're gonna make sure we sign that document, and you can take that authorization at any time. And so one of the things that we talk about, and I'm gonna go to limitations first, but where confidentiality can be overruled, if you will, and breached, sounds like you're doing the wrong thing, but it's during an emergency. But I think the balance is when there's limitations, it still doesn't mean I'm gonna be like, well, okay, here's all the stuff. I'm gonna say, and I always told my staff years ago that, so when Joe's down and we're calling an ambulance, go print off that, we had special sheets we print off, even back in the old days, and it would say name, diagnosis, medications. That's it. You don't need to say that Joe does all these things, he has these behaviors. It's a medical situation right now, that's all we need, and so it's that need to know basis, right? But we think that it might be more helpful if I give a little more. But as a reminder, we're violating that confidentiality. And we used to have with our EMS, and I lived in Bloomington for many years. But they're like, you know, they were just tired of Susie because she's just a burden. If Susie's in a medical emergency, I don't care what she's done. Like, if they talk about Susie, like, no, we can't do that. And this is not my staff, it's the EMS. And so always remembering, like, where in that emergency, where's the cutoff? What do we need to share? What does it have to do right now with the situation? If there's more that needs to happen when Joe or Susie is better, we'll talk to them about, this might be important information for you to share, or I can help you share that with your authorization to do that. We're also able to give information and kind of share confidential information if we're moving towards a voluntary or involuntary commitment for mental health care. There's still limitations. Again, you're talking about why someone needs to be hospitalized. And those are behaviors that are happening right now, because you can't go back and like, well, in 2012, Mary did all these things. This is right, I'm being hospitalized right now. So what is the criteria? What's happening with me? Maybe I can't take care of myself. Maybe I said that I'm at risk for harming myself. That information needs to be shared, but you don't need to say Mary's done that 15 times before, right? So again, protecting that, and then that allows the individual to also, I think about it on the other end, get the help they need without having this quote reputation or something that sets forth. It's really hard when people know information about you that should be confidential. You ever had that happen to you? You're like, how do you know that? I told Fred. Now you know. And so think about how I always try to say, in my shoes, we'd never want that to happen. Individuals we're serving are just as equal as we are, and they deserve the same respect in that. Protecting third parties. So again, I talked about maybe harm to ourselves, but also harm to other people. We're allowed to share some information about that, who the person is, who's at risk. Again, very limited information. Reporting requirements. So if you're reporting to the Office of Inspector General, if you're reporting to DCFS and having to do that, if you're calling the Elder Abuse Hotline, again, you want to give enough information for them to take it, what we've heard, and this is what, but you let them kind of drive the questions, and then you give that information, but don't, you can easily be kind of baited. People can ask a lot of questions, and you may have to stop and think, what should I be sharing? Is that a part of this? We have a lot of the DCFS colleagues who ask a lot of information, and staff feel obligated to tell them. I'm like, absolutely not. You are not obligated. That is not just because of their role. And so really navigating that professionally, as we all do, and then, we're not trying to put barriers up. We're trying to protect confidentiality of our clients because of that relationship we have. And then in supervision and consultation. So I don't know what that looks like, across your agencies, but, if you meet weekly with your supervisor, you have certain individual consultation discussions, you still want to share as limited information as possible. Again, you don't even need to have the name. You need to talk about the situation at hand, especially in a consultation. And then, as a supervision, it might be a little more information to help work through how you're going to move forward working with that individual. But that then information during those meetings stays confidential, right? So you have that, you meet with your supervisor, you meet with another colleague, and you say, okay, here's what we figured out. Thank you. That's helpful. And then that stays with the colleague you talk to, and then you move forward. But again, it's limit as little information as possible. I think one of the things that gets challenging for us is some of the ways that maybe we don't routinely think about safeguarding confidentiality because we're in our work all the time. But when I talk about in client files, and in terms of documentation, one of the things we came across in Macon County is we talked about what are folks reporting if someone has reported a diagnosis of HIV. And this was related to our point in time count. Like, we can't document that. It's the federal law, it's a state law. So what are things that are going to our clients' files and how much information do you share, right? A client information, certain things we need to know because to get housing, various things, but do we need to write a whole book about Mary's mental health concerns? We need certain points, but it's not about our judgment, about our perspective. It's about facts. It's about what Mary needs. And so thinking about how those files are put together, but also where are those files? And so are they sitting in our offices? Are they out where people can access them? Meaning even as colleagues, just because we all work together, doesn't mean I should, if my caseload I have access to, shouldn't mean I'm in your caseload, just because I'm curious, because I used to work with that one client and I want to know, right? So it's thinking about what is the process that's in place in that system to safeguard. But you know, if people are coming into your office and you've got a stack of files, an individual can see those. And they can see your name, the names on there, and that's protected information. And it's hard to think about every day, because again, you're busy, you're doing things, you're just trying to help. But I always used to, when things got out of control in my office, I would just lock the door and I would tell the housekeeper to say, don't worry about it, I'll get my trash, I'll vacuum, I don't even have a space to put this away, and I'm the only one who had a key to my office, because there were files out there. And we don't want to put them in a position to have that information as well and violate our clients.
Could you talk about the HIV again, the HIV or AIDS? And you said that is, we cannot.
You cannot, in a record, put that someone has even reported to you, or you know of a diagnosis of HIV and AIDS, because that came about years ago when it first broke, AIDS, because of the discrimination that happened. People say, I'm not gonna serve you because you've gotten, remember how we all fought back in the day, everybody thought just because I looked at you, I would get, you know, AIDS. And so it was a real federally protected. And so what happens is you still need to document something. This is a health concern, right? So you, immunosuppressant diagnosis. Now, people might guess that it's HIV, but you're not violating their confidentiality. But knowing that then again, even if they say you can put it in the file, you can't. So I think those are I can, Jessica, I don't know, I can send some links or something to,
It was I'll say it was a big surprise when Mary told us that, because it's kind of where the federal government's working at cross
Yeah.
purposes with each other.
Yeah, because HUD asked for it.
Because HUD asked.
yes, right,
Yeah, and Mary says, we can't be asking that. Well, HUD tells us we should, you can't do it. So we listen to Mary, I guess.
yeah,
And there's specific types of housing for HIV and AIDS.
right.
Yeah, so how do you qualify somebody for housing that's restricted to HIV?
And that's a great question. I'm gonna do some research on that now, because there has to be an avenue for that you can document that.
I may have a.
And maybe that's a
coordination
doctor's
on that works, at a location there that is HIV housing. I'm gonna reach out to him too, he may have some guy, I mean.
It's a great idea, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
There's
Um,
also Doorways in St. Louis. Something might be familiar with it, does HIV housing.
okay. Yeah, so in order, because that is a protected class and getting that housing for them, obviously we need to know, but potentially, I'm guessing, no attorney, not an expert, that maybe it's through the doctor or getting that verification through there, and how that works in a separate. So the idea of too, when we're collecting it, where is it stored? So that may be different as well, and maybe because of special HIV housing, they have a different process.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are things that, you know, I tend to be a person who, before I think, because I've had some, as we all have, we've made mistakes in the past, but I tend to just think, is that something I can share? And really nothing's immediate unless someone literally is, right, has fallen over and I'm gonna take that risk. But even if Joe has HIV, I can't tell EMS. That's not, they should be protecting like everybody has it,
Right.
right? That's that's what universal precaution, that's what we do, right? But sometimes people, I just think I want to, well, no, you can't. And so we had an individual in one of our group homes who reported, and the doctor, I saw the doctor's information who, and this is years ago, that he was HIV positive. I couldn't even tell my staff. You can't even tell anybody. Like, you just know it. So what I had to do is I put in the record what I knew, and I didn't say HIV, but staff were furious, because what I did is I encouraged the individual to tell people. I said, you know, if you feel comfortable, we worked through it a long time, and once he did, I said, we're here. We support you, and you can still live here, and finally he did, but staff were furious with me. And that was really when I started to learn about this and what you can and cannot say. And I said, again, take universal precautions. You should not, at any cost. That's what you do. We're working with people. People have stuff, right? And so it was really ended up being a good experience, because the client really felt empowered. They were not upset at him and judging it. They were just more mad at the policy. I said, I don't make these policies. This would be the federal government, not me. And why do you need to know? That's because we don't know. There's other people maybe who in this house have that as well, but that's their own information. So I get a little feisty about that. Releases of information. So one of the things that obviously you do these and you know these, and I think, not sure how your agencies these are presented, but releases can get really technical, right? Just because you sign a release of information doesn't mean you get to share everything, right? There's certain, I get this information, you may share my diagnosis, maybe I could say, okay, I could tell Jessica, yep, I'm gonna sign this, but you can only tell someone my diagnosis, you can only tell someone my gender identity, whatever it is. And that doesn't mean you get carte blanche to say, here's what all about Mary Garrison. And we tend to say, well, I have a release on file. Well, what is marked on that release and what is okay to share? And at the time, is it still okay? If I need to call someone's family member, talk to someone, I still ask the client, you say I can do this right now? Are you still okay with that? You've signed it. I don't really have to ask that question, but I do, because I want to make sure also that I'm sharing that information. Because I need to help you, but if you're not okay with it now, you were before, then let's have a different conversation. So sometimes we make assumptions that, oh, that it does last for a year and we have to have a cutoff date when you have releases. But again, that relationship piece is, if I'm talking about someone under the right rules and able to, I want them to know that. We're not a group of talking over here and then I'll go back to my client. They're part of that process with us. And that's incredibly important, that they have the power to say, well, I know Mary went and talked to so-and-so, and she told me she was going to, and I'm okay with that. I have a release, right? Again, they get to control how this information is shared and what that looks like. And oftentimes I'll want them to do it with me. That's the ideal piece, is I'm supporting them as they share that information, or I'm making sure they know before I'm doing it. And so thinking about that they're signed by the client, if your client has a any kind of power of attorney or guardian, what that looks like. But are they able to sign a release of information? Do they have the capacity to do that? And so just, I encourage you to think through that and what that looks like in your organizations, and how that looks. And again, they have to have end dates and you have to renew them. They're not like good for life. So, and typically it's a year that you would have. Any questions on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I wanna just, say that when people are talking to you, they're talking to you as a representative of your organization, of IRBA, CEFS, Illinois Valley, not you as Mary or Susie.
Right.
And,
Good point.
you know, and the release of information has to do with information going outside of your organization, not outside of you personally. It's not an agreement with you personally. And if you ever feel, you know, this is something that I shouldn't keep to myself, go to your supervisor, you know.
Your gut's probably right.
And you can't say, I'm gonna hold that to myself. You say, listen, whatever you're gonna tell me, I may need to share it with somebody. You're free to tell me, but understand that I can't promise absolute confidentiality.
And what are the limitations of that, right? And what
Yeah,
are some of
yeah.
the things?
And yeah, just like you said, you might go to your supervisor and say, listen, I feel uncomfortable because I had a client tell me blah, blah, blah. Your supervisor says, I need to know who that person is right now. You better tell them.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Because your supervisor has a reason. Doesn't mean you go tell, you know, your coworkers or
Mhm.
whoever walks in the door from your agency, but you need to realize that confidentiality is not with you personally.
I appreciate that, Fred, and I think your point also about that you're representing the agency. Somebody,
Yeah.
we know that someone from Heritage, they just share information everywhere because one person did it, right? And then it harms any relationships that you've all created. And I'm, again, I think most people are trying to safeguard confidentiality, but I think it caught up in the moment, and that's why it's about, like you said, pacing and kind of, okay, I'm just gonna have that patience, I'm gonna think through what information is coming my way, so that's very helpful. The other part is location of discussions. So as colleagues, unless we're sharing a client, really, there's no reason that individuals should be knowing about what's going on with your clients. Unless it's a staffing again, or something that makes sense for those folks to be there. But also, where are you talking? Are you talking in the hallway? Maybe I'm not really, you don't think I'm paying attention. I'm in my office, the door's open and you guys are talking over here. But I'm probably gonna hear it. I'm not gonna do anything with it, but it's still information. I always go back to how I would feel if my information was being talked about in the grocery store lane. Right? And so sometimes we're not in positions to have a room to go to. So you remove yourself as far as possible and say, here's the deal, I need to talk to you. And we need to handle this now. And then you move along and say, I need your support to do this. So again, thinking about and being deliberate about where those discussions are happening, and in what that looks like. So just again, paying attention to that environment that you have. And then the content of discussion. So we talked about earlier, need to know basis. What is an imperative for us to know related to that? What are the facts and what makes sense about that? And then we move on from there. Questions? Okay. All right, we're gonna talk about boundaries. This is fun. Maybe there's some deep things we're dealing with, but so I'm gonna kind of cover some of these things, but looking at distinction between appropriate and inappropriate boundaries. This is what we're trying to do, right? What is right versus wrong? What's good versus bad? Boundaries can be really, really difficult. And the best example I can kind of give is just a very easy one is it right or wrong to hug a client?
My experience in 27 years in the medical field and social work, I was always told we shouldn't. But it's kind of hard when you have someone in tears looking at you going, can I have a hug? I don't know, it's a fine line.
I know I've handled it both ways. I've said, I'm sorry, but we need to keep a professional relationship, and hugging isn't probably part of that. Then I'd love to, but I just shouldn't and I can't. And then I've hugged them too, because they're going, please, can I just want to hug you because I'm,
I was a firm boundary girl for years. Yeah, we're not hugging, and people would be like, but I just need a human, no one's hugged me, right? Like, we have clients they've been touched for years. Human touch is incredibly important, right? And what we have in that relationship, and that could destroy the relationship. I'm not saying we just run around hugging people, and you never just go up and do it, but requests. There are times where you can also do ways to support people through appropriate touch without hugging. May I hold your hand?
Yeah, I always try the handshake
Yep.
first.
May I lay my hand here? Ask, you always have to ask though, right? And so if they're asking you, and again, I think it's depending on the situation, so you can't say it's right or wrong. We are told it's very black and white, this is what you do not do, and I think that's a harmful profession. I think it's about understanding what boundaries are. Now, some people who they just love to hug everybody, great, and I'm not that, I sound like an ogre, but I'm selective in my hugging, right? And so, and I'm okay with, it's fine if that's comfortable for you to hug people, but that doesn't mean the person on the other end wants it. We do it on our preference, and then I was so reserved, I was like, I'm gonna take my hug away from you because I'm not comfortable. It was about me, not about the person. So it's kind of figuring those things out with what's right in front of you. And there's times where, based on the individual, even if they're asking, it's not appropriate. It also depends on where you are. If you're embracing somewhere with a hug or touching an individual, even on, I would say, may I touch your shoulder? If we're in a room, I don't want it to be perceived. I have power as the person that I'm serving. And I need to make sure that I use that power for good and never have them feel like they're in a situation. And so, and also using our words maybe in replace of a hug, and I sometimes say, I'm gonna give you a virtual hug right now. I'm doing this and I care about you. So, again, being creative, but I think that's a kind of an example that probably happens routinely, like people wanting that. And we went back to why you're here. You were not, I mean, if I were to, something was happening there, one of you would come up and hug me. We would do that to each other. And that's that compassion, those are the other things too. So we know we have to have that boundary with our client, but that doesn't mean we're hugging every day. It means when they're in distress, we're thinking about it differently. And we're making sure that it is, again, appropriate. So
I think Mary, I
No.
think one thing with that too, COVID definitely complicated those waters too. Especially during that flu season, some people are very,
yeah,
even
you're right.
in an elevator with somebody, so
Yeah.
definitely that asking piece, hey, is it okay if I touch on phone, just because, some people are very.
Thank you for bringing that. It's a great point. You're right. And recognizing that some people are feeling like they need today still too, and COVID's coming back, and that's whatever they're needing and the support. So, and again, it just creates more of a relationship with that person that you're asking and giving them that respect that, they get to make that decision. If you say, may I, or what kind of supports do you need? So we do have to have a line that separates us from those that we serve. We talk about, I can't be friends with my clients, right? No, I'm not going to the movies, I'm not doing things, but we're friendly with them. I can share, it was easy in me, I'd be like, oh, I have a kid, I can talk about my kid, I can talk about my dog, you talk about things in your life. But those relationships, as we build them, and it's been interesting just as I get older, and especially with similar clients over the years that I've just known in the community, that's why I'm just genuine with them. And that's why there's nothing, I can tell you I live on the West End. I'm not giving you my home address and my phone number. You're my community, right? And so again, thinking about what is important and what's important for that client. You also want to give information and cross that boundary. That's a burden on them sometimes, right? We want to make it safe for them. and that separation. So again, not always clear, not always easily, to establish. So we have our personal boundaries that we all set up and are hopefully comfortable with on your own. And these are how I engage in my relationships, and obviously they're at different levels, how we do that. How we behave towards people, what works for us individually. Again, we all might have our own space. And then when it comes into professional boundaries, because if you are a hugger or you communicate differently, it may not be okay in your professional role. And as we're empathetic, we're caring, we're compassionate, we might feel a little frustrated by that. Like, why can't I do that? But again, the message that's being said by maybe an inappropriate boundary is going to harm the relationship. So what we're trying to do with professional boundaries is to allow a sense of professional identity. We're trying to be consistent and have cohesion. So it's why it's really important as professionals, we all try to stay on the same thing. Another example is, I think I might have it here, yeah, is potential violations, but I'll do that in a minute, but it also establishes professional boundaries that this is a professional relationship. I am here with you. As my role is this, and here's what your role is, right? And we're equal. We just have different roles in this. But it also prescribes a system of limits and expectations. A lot of our folks that we serve have not come from healthy boundary backgrounds. It's almost welcoming to some, like, at first might not be understood and they might be frustrated, but they deserve the right to have boundaries themselves and help teach them that's okay. We talk about vulnerable people and that we know that they're at risk, and we want them to be able to say, I can have this boundary with folks and I don't have to do this. And so it really helps us in those, that again, the client relationship. It's based on personal values. It's based on culture, right? So I worked a lot during the last 17 years with the Native American tribe in Oklahoma. And if you do not eat their food, take what they're offering you, you will have no relationship. But what's the rule? You shouldn't accept, or you don't eat someone's food. What might be in it? What might be happening, right? I remember going into a client's home years ago. I was working with kids and I was a new mom. My son was about 6 months old and it was in Decatur. And I went and I was there to assess this child to see if they needed some services. So for developmental intellectual disability. So we went in and this family they prepared probably all week for my visit. I walked in, they had no floor, they had dust floor. Like they had walls, it was completely dust. It was the most, like they had a couch, everything, it looked beautiful. For that, I mean, they lived in very much impoverished. And grandma was there, mom was there, and the little kid was there. And yeah, I'm 25. Okay, here we go. And you could see that they'd almost raked the dirt. And so they had rugs on it. And when I walked in, they had from the ceiling, those fly tapes. Yeah. 30 filled with flies. So you're looking at your surroundings, right? And figured out. So then they're like, hi. Okay, I think they were nervous. I was nervous, we hadn't met yet, and okay, and I'm new as a professional, so I'm nervous. So they sit down and they're like, what do we do? And I said, well, Johnny, and they said, oh, would you like some water? Sure. I'm not gonna turn it away. These guys, you could just tell they had planned. As I'm sitting on the couch, fleas are just popping. So, but they are just talking, and we had grandma was just, oh gosh, could not love her grandson more. Mom was just working really hard. And I spent about an hour in there. And it was one of the most impactful experiences of my life. that I was allowed in, what that meant for them. If I had done anything to be like, nope, or I can't sit down. Yeah, I don't know, it's hard to decide what to do in the moment. And so we ended up getting the child in, for services and got them some other services as well to help them, with their income challenges and their housing challenges, and got them into another house. But that's what they had. So I tried to meet them where they are, right? And then I went home terrified that I was gonna bring fleas to my new 6-month-old. So I had a plan. We lived in an apartment. I'd always come in, there was a washer machine in the basement. I'd have clothes there, I'd change, put in a washer, then I'd go pick up my child. But it's interesting that's why, think about relationships and boundaries, they all tie together. And we have to know who our client is, and that's why the building that relationship early on is so important, because then their interests, a little bit about their culture, right? And then you think about from an ethical lens, what is appropriate to do? It would be completely inappropriate for me to just walk out and say, I refuse to see you in your home. Right? That's where they were. So, and I went back multiple times. It was harder going back other times because I knew what was coming. So I had to really prepare myself. But then once I got there, it's like they're such kind people. You're like, oh my gosh, the trust that was built up was incredible. So I say that because I think, again, these are not easy things that we're talking about, but our professional boundaries do benefit the individuals we serve. And I think that's incredibly important to remember and to think about those things, because again, we have the privilege of being a part of their lives. But what boundary might harm them that we don't put in place? So potential boundary violations, over involvement. So a lot of times, that's wrong, I shouldn't say a lot of times. On occasion, people feel that kind of doing more for someone that is really outside of the scope of their role is really helpful, and it may not be. It begins to blur the boundaries that I'm going to drive you home every night after work. Not that I wouldn't want to, but what am I setting up? Also, what am I setting up for you? Mary's pretty cool, but she takes me everywhere and drives me home from work, and she's my caseworker. But you're not very nice, because you're not doing this. So I'm also challenging, again, the agency and the boundaries with that. And so we have to think about that. But it might not, it could harm the client and the expectation that they have, and put them in an uncomfortable spot as well. We talked about touching a little bit, about different ways. Again, always an ask of touching. Even if that's your norm, you gotta, it's like my problem solving thing, I gotta reel it in. Mine was more moving into touching appropriately when I needed to, when someone is completely distressed in front of me. What can I do? And what is comfortable balance for that? Receiving, taking money or gifts. There's always rules about that. People say, oh, I can't take anything over $10, or I can't take, it's, or whatever monetary value. If you gave me a Christmas ornament, that's calm with me. Christmas is coming up. You want to give me a Christmas ornament? Thank you so much. It's very kind. We say thank you in a lot of ways, through gifts, through food. Why would not our clients want that same experience? I want to give you something. So one of the things I always did is I had an individual that I worked with. Every year she would give me a Christmas ornament that I was thinking of. And my son has red hair, played soccer his whole career as a youth. And every year she'd go find these Christmas ornaments that fascinated me. I'm like, where are you getting these? She had seen his picture on my desk, and there was a little soccer player with red hair. And each year, and I'm like, are you making these? Because if you take one and do, no, when she would bring me one every year with a different pose, but always had the red hair, a different little jersey. Whoa, come on. I can't take that from you. So I thank you so much. And what I did is we shared it with, I got to see it every day at work. It was on the Christmas tree in our organization, right? That we had in our program, right? Or I leave it at the office in terms of that, and I do that. And so it's balancing out what that looks like. We do things for people. It's very common to send a thank you note and maybe a treat for someone. And so again, it's not black and white. It's thinking about the impact on the individuals we're serving. Now, we don't want them, and they shouldn't be spending money on gifts for us. So how do we have those conversations that just the relationship we have and how we're working together is really lovely, and that I'd like you to save that money to maybe get something you need for your house or that you're working towards, and really try to figure that out. Has anybody had any difficult issues with that? Wow. Good. I think it's fascinating agency to agency, because a lot of times they say, again, gift card under $10 you can take. What's 10 or 15? I don't know, but again, it's balancing the relationship.
I have a story.
Oh, good, Fred.
Well, totally out of its field, but gosh, probably 20 years ago, I was doing HR consulting for a manufacturing firm. And the director of purchasing, so this is the person who buys things from their vendors, raw materials for whatever they were manufacturing. Had more goodies, he had more free vacations, more golf trips, more cool stuff than anybody else in the company. And boy, did that cause resentment, because he just accepted, he accepted these gifts personally.
Yeah.
And flew off to Hawaii to play golf. Because he had purchased, X gross of raw materials from this company, and so they want to keep the contract, so they just showered him with gifts.
And I think that's important, like, and he got to benefit, like, they weren't going to the agency in a raffle of who gets to go on the Hawaii.
Yeah, he wasn't very popular.
Yeah, I bet. There's a lot of that with vendors, with medication reps.
Oh, there you go.
There were all kinds of rules put in place because it was willy-nilly years ago. They were doing all kinds of things like that, and now that's very calculated what you aren't allowed to bring in and what you're allowed to take. I remember that in my early days. I was like, we're going to dinner 5 nights a week? I don't even prescribe medicine, but I get to go because I'm a part of the agency, so. Self-disclosure, right? So that there's a balance there as well. We talked about individuals with lived experience. That's part of why folks who have the experience are so incredibly important to the work, because we want some of that self-disclosure, but there's still a balance, right? There's still a boundary with that. Still a boundary with whatever I do disclose about my life without lived experience. Things that I think would make people uncomfortable, individuals served, is that anything that puts up kind of pressure on someone, like if I said, they say, hey, I'm a cancer survivor. And you say, well, I'm going through cancer right now. That's a lot for that person to hold on to. So how do we navigate those things and make sure about our disclosure and what that looks like, and how our lived experience, where's the cutoff of that, so that it's always helping the individual, right, being served, using that again for good. Dual relationships, right? So having a relationship in some form with an individual that you're seeing them in different places. They're coming in for this, and then they're a part of your neighborhood or group or something. And what does that look like? And when do you remove yourself from those? It's really hard in small towns. Rural communities face this a great deal. So I think we just have to make sure if we have a dual relationship, we talk through that, right? If there's one AA group meeting in Shelbyville, and I need to go to AA, and a client of mine happens to, what are we gonna do? Now, if I have the ability to go somewhere else, okay. Decatur, we have a lot of them. I'm probably gonna remove myself and go to another one, potentially, but I also have to make sure I'm okay. But I wanna protect the client. So you have to have those conversations. I think one of the things about boundaries and ethics, it's, our clients, we should be having those conversations. That wouldn't really be ethical for me. That would be something that could be harmful for you, and why I'm making decisions I'm making, so they know that I'm caring about our relationship. And then, of course, confidentiality, which we talked about. How do we establish these boundaries, making sure we don't violate is, again, focusing on best interest. What is the reason I'm sharing this information? Why am I doing this? Why am I engaging in this behavior? That's why when you create a relationship early on, we need to learn about the life experiences of a client, because that can come back later and how we are communicating with them. We're ultimately responsible as the professional. It's not a client's fault if I violate a boundary. I'm the judgment person here. I have the control in the relationship. And so that's why you need to think about that. We need to communicate really clearly too. Anticipate potential boundary violations. I think you know folks that you work with, and you can maybe sense that this might be problematic, or you're working with them again. There's things that happen with our individual clients. And again, recognize when there is a boundary violation. One of the biggest things that happens with boundary violations in ethics is people get in a situation and they can't get out. The number one ethics violation for social workers and counselors is having a sexual relationship with their client. Now, that seems pretty black and white, right? It seems like the easiest one in my code of ethics. But here's what's happening. We've made it, we're judging you, you get in, we've all probably gotten into a relationship that maybe wasn't the best for us. We've made some poor judgments, friendships, any kind of relationship. We're scared to tell anybody that I might have feelings for my client. Because what is wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with you. You're a human being. And thank you for telling me, because I want to help you with that. This is a problem that it can harm you and the client, definitely, in your profession. But we've made it like, you just shouldn't do that. We've made it unsafe for people to share when they are thinking there's a bound, like I need to consult with you because this happened today. Because we're thinking, I don't want to look like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. Or that I'm in it. We're here to support each other and help each other. We're not here to fire you to get rid of people's licenses. You're doing the best you can. We know there's calculated people out in the world who are doing that, but we also know there's a lot of people who fall into relationships are hard. And so I give that example because it does seem pretty black and white. You don't do it, but it would not be the number one violation of these professions if it was that easy. So making it safe, have conversations with each other about, even if you notice something. Hey, I just, you can blame it on me. We were just in various training. But say, hey, I just want to make sure, do you need any support? Or I don't know, maybe I'm wrong and I saw something very different, but this is how I saw you interacting. It's not a judgment, it's a protection for you, and it's a protection for the client, right? Ultimately, for who we serve. Problem solving. I gotta hop to it, man. So just, we're in the problem solving business in a lot of ways, right? We have the system that you guys work in is a tough one, and we have to be doing problem solving every day to help support the individuals we're serving. So, there's a process to problem solving, but what we're trying to do is really defining a problem, determining why it's happening. We identify, prioritize, and select alternatives and implement a new solution. We have to do that, whether it's a paperwork situation, another process situation. And so just really looking at, again, we have to, this process here and what we do. And I think we have to, when we're going through that process, think about what's in the best interest. Who is this helping? Is it helping the greater good? Is this something that is just impacting me and my work? Is it impacting the individuals we're serving? And again, it can't be just about me. What's going to be a better process? We know there's tons we could probably change. I mean, you just look at HUD, right? And we could have a whole problem changing process. But I bring this up, I could talk a long time about this, but it is our responsibility, no matter what your role, to look at things that are problematic and help identify those. If we can give access to individuals we're serving, it can be a better way to get someone what they need in that process. Just because we've done it that way all the time, doesn't mean it's really been effective. And so you're in it and knowing what the problems are out there. How can we use this problem-solving process to help move through that, to get clarity and to have it be most effective? You know, I think when we look at also why looking at alternatives, it's being very skilled at what do we need to consider? Is there something we can do differently that really doesn't cause any anticipated other problems? Is it gonna ripple effect into more? Well, we might not wanna do that. Is that problem acceptable if we look at an alternative acceptable to everyone? What are we looking at? Again, is it just for what works for me, but does it work for the whole process? Problem solving can be very, very difficult at some levels if you're talking about the larger system level. But a good problem solver will really go through the process in outlining what this looks like, okay? So I'm gonna not spend as much time in that so we can get into communication. So when we think about communication, we all know there's two ways, verbal and nonverbal. But here, the difference is the delivery, the intentionality, the grammar, the authenticity, the emotion, and the engagement. So, you know, when you think about nonverbal, obviously it's body language, and verbal relies on words. And having been a person who for years, 17 years, was talking in front of people and students and doing presentations, I've always thought a lot about the intentionality of what I say, right? And making sure I'm using appropriate language that's non-judgmental, not stigmatizing. We all make mistakes. But I think when you think about the differences, the delivery of that is when I have verbal communication, right? I can do it through face-to-face, I can do it over the phone. I can even do it through email and written letters. That's verbal, I'm writing, it's grammar, right? And haven't we all, now the world is, I sound like I'm 89, but texting and emailing, it's much easier to post something or text it than say it, and we're saying things that have great impact, right? And that intent, what's the intention of that you may never, someone might not say face-to-face to someone. And so when you think about nonverbal, that's when we're together as parties and we're seeing those nonverbal responses. So I can be very intentional about what I say verbally here. But my facial expression, my closed offness maybe, by how I'm not looking at you, no eye contact, can give you a whole different message, right? So I can have both of those at the same time. Do you know folks that in your lives or your work that talk without looking at you? So Native American culture that I've learned from the tribe that I've worked with, that was one of the, I knew and from just learning about the Native American culture, that eye contact was often something that was not consistent. It was uncomfortable. But when you see it in person, until really someone gets to know you, and even when they don't, they're not looking, and I'm like, you know, we've been taught that direct eye contact means you are paying attention, you're giving me respect, right? You're doing all of these things. So I'm like, what's wrong with you? You're not giving me respect. Well, that's within their culture. And so thinking about what is the intention of our message? How do we have to revisit that with different individuals we're serving, right? What are some nonverbal rules that we have? So you're always supposed to look at someone, general culture would say. You're always supposed to have that eye contact. What else are you supposed to do? Non-verbally.
Forward face somebody, but not like completely rigid, like not like a, you know what I mean, like, yeah, like comfortable. Yeah. Like not like, yeah, friendly, but not too.
Yeah. Oh, and we gotta have so much between us, right? I'm a person, so now Fred's sitting down, so the other thing is, I gotta balance what I'm doing here. right?
You have a lot of space.
Yeah, and so I might be like, hey, yeah, what's going on? How you doing, right? Instead of like this, yeah. And so thinking about if someone's standing up, I'm a very much a side person. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Instead of maybe, whoo, here she comes, right in front. And so again, what I'm saying might be spot on, but what I'm doing, my body language is telling a whole different message, and we're paying attention to that. I like to put myself in those shoes and think a lot about that. Like, oh, that was a weird conversation. I don't even know what they said really because of the body language that I was getting. And so thinking about, we have to be as intentional with our verbal as we do with our nonverbals. And the other thing, I love to cross my legs on my arms. It's just my comfort zone. So I used to find myself early on as a professional, like, I'd be so uncomfortable because I was doing all the wrong things, but I'm not just gonna do it. Like, it's just how I am. No one said, Mary, you're so standoffish. They've never done that, because I think the other nonverbals were fine, but no one ever said this either, but I could tell they're like, what is she doing? She keeps undoing her legs and doing this, because I was not paying attention, because I was so worried about what I was doing with my nonverbals. And so I think it's a balance of, again, knowing that I'm a person who, if I don't smile or make some intention to smile, I look pretty intense. I remember a student coming to my office one day, and I was doing some work on my computer, and they came to the door, and I'm doing, and they're like, hey, can I talk to you, Mary? I'm like, yeah, yep. And I looked, and they're like, God, they've never seen me. They're like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. And so I remember my dad always said, you've got my smile or lack of, you need to always make it at least straight, because I'm like, doing my thing. And so I tend to pay a lot of attention to that. Like when I'm real intense and I hear someone else, I'll be like, I'm intense. I don't want people to be scared to talk to me. I don't want clients to be able to not feel like they can. Rolling your eyes. We can do that intentionally, but sometimes we're given eyes like they get bigger, they get little, and that's like, oh, that just made a message there. So, also looking at when we talk about grammar, and those patterns and adhering to the grammar. And I think again, in our world of work, we have to think about the language that we use so that it doesn't come off as you did this or you did that, right? And again, I don't think that's our intention, but sometimes we can get so deep in the work that we might say things that come off inappropriately. And so again, being very intentional about what that looks like. So let me think about where that. Okay. About 89% of your communication is nonverbal. So think about that and think about what that looks like. And so, especially when you're trying to de-escalate, we're going to talk about that will either escalate or not, and it matters a great deal in there. So often they do see and react to what you're saying with your body language as opposed to what you're verbally saying. I think we got to remember too, that there's a difference between hearing and listening. How many times you've walked away and been like, what does that mean? Like, I don't even know, or what did they tell me? Again, we're busy, but it's getting in the moment, clearing. You talked about coming to work the next day, right? Through your day, you almost have to be like, okay, I'm here with this person, and take a moment to say, new person, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna listen to what's going on, new engagement, and then really be able to listen. Do you guys take notes when how do you feel about that? Like, are you a person who sits down and is pretty good about remembering what people say? Yeah, no,
It depends.
Mhm.
Do a little bit of both.
Mhm.
Face to face, I'm good, but on the phone, it's gotta be notes.
Okay. Mhm. Yeah. And I think that's fine, right? It's whatever it is to help you. I take weird notes, like I'll write like 4 words, but it helps me remember what we were doing and what was happening, right? Because I don't want to be like, I'm not a real book writer. And so, but yeah, I think using those things too, as you think about how you're gaining that information and how that's coming into you is really important.
Mary, do you think like when you're taking notes, you ask for consent, like not necessarily consent, but like maybe come on a Zoom call, but like, hey, just so you know, I'm taking notes, so that it doesn't look like, especially on Zoom, I'm not paying attention, because I don't want them to feel like I'm not listening to you, I'm doing something else, but I'm also trying to be engaged.
I think that's a really good, even in person, I think it is, right? And then, because what do you write down on me, right?
Right.
So I think it is, hey, just to make sure that I'm getting all the information, I might take a few notes if you're comfortable with that. And if they're not, you might have to figure out how to remember that information, but yes, I do, because you want to continue that engagement. And know that they're being heard, right? That you are listening to what they're saying. So de-escalation. So when we think about this, the formal definition is to decrease in extent, volume, or scope. So it refers to behavior that is intended to escape escalations of conflict. So this focuses a lot on verbal de-escalation. So we have some tactics that can be, used during a highly charged, if you will, potentially dangerous or threatening situation to prevent it getting further, escalating further into physical confrontation. So yesterday, I was meeting with an individual in a housing unit office because of the situation. And this individual is known for escalation. I'm not a person who gets uncomfortable, really. I mean, you can be here and you can say whatever you need to say. And I don't believe this person would be physical. But as I'm meeting with him more times, I think there's potential. So I did almost just, it was for him to know that I brought out a safety person from my team. So I just want you to sit in the other office. And it was interesting because I was thinking about talking today about this, that he's very escalated, right? And he got escalated, but also because I was so calm. It got him frustrated. I was just, look, he was right here, there, and and he wanted answers, and he wanted me to say something as opposed to, I appreciate you sharing that, and looking at him, and he didn't, and then he went into, well, you're one of the only people that I trust, but he's so angry at me, and he started swearing and saying all kinds of things and making some vague threats. Safety guy comes in, he did a good job. Oh, hello. And he sat down and the client didn't even acknowledge him. It was fascinating. He did calm down a bit. But so I say that because I think a couple things. I tried to think about what I needed to be doing there non-verbally and verbally, what I needed to say. My goal was not to escalate the situation. So then I had to shift a bit and communicate a little bit more as opposed to being quiet, because that was what he wasn't liking, right? So balancing out the person in front of you and what you have to understand why, if it's you, I mean, you might come into a situation you may not know. So I'm getting ahead of myself. The importance, when we engage in de-escalation, it offers a much more positive environment where we can build that relationship. When we're here, we're not getting anywhere. We're just yelling at each other, or we're just staring at each other, whatever we're doing. It enhances service provision as well, right? And it's a part of that relationship. I know how this person communicates. I knew what I was walking into, but this is the longest time we had met. So I know more now of how I might the next time engage with him. But I think in the end, we ended very well. And I think it built into our relationship. I learned, he learned what we were going to do moving forward, hence hopefully better service provision. Again, there's a benefit of, we really want to not have harm on staff and clients, right? We want to have that safety for them, so that everybody's okay, and only escalation will cause some of that harm. And again, it's about this idea about relationships. So you either have an effective one or effective one or not, and it's therapeutic or it's hostile. I mean, we need a therapeutic relationship. That's how we get our work done. And again, we have folks bringing in a lot of stuff with them. that they're bringing to the table for you beyond their immediate need. And so figuring out how to help them de-escalate from those things. And again, it reduces conflicts and it fosters trust. So, you know, some things that when we think about our eyes, let's just talk about all our nonverbal communication. Our eyes, and I was escalating him. I don't think my eyes were moving yesterday, but I think it was more, he felt I was really just looking at it. Well, probably staring at it. That's how he perceived it, and it matters, right? How someone's perceiving it. So some things we think about with what can escalate, or I could be like, "Ooh," right? My eyes raised. I don't say a word, but I'm like, eyes wide open, that hard stare. Sometimes, and again, I would, maybe I'd love to see a video of it, but I think I was trying to soft stare and be listening. But again, that is what he perceived, I think. And then the rolling of the eyes. And some of that can be, if you have just reactions in certain ways with your nonverbals, you have to pay attention to those. Closing your eyes. I talked with someone recently who most of the time, their eyes were closed. Then they'd open up, and I'm like, are they okay? And then I'm like, this is who they are. That's just, they're thinking, they're pulling information up. They're like, okay. So you got to think about those things and what that means from us as a helper. And so I could be not listening to you if I'm closing my eyes. So escalate the situation. Now you're angry at me from that. So again, all those kinds of nonverbals. Invasion of personal space, we talked about. One of the things that is really important when you're in an escalated situation is to try to get space for the client and for yourself. Client needs to be just as protected as we do, so nothing, you know, they're not running into something they're doing, but also kind of keeping everything out in the open. Don't even do this, right? You know, it's like just kind of being, don't put your hands in your pockets. Those things can escalate, and anyone could determine, this is what I think you're going to do to me. I think you're going to come at me. I think, no matter what's going on in a person's life. So I think that's really important. You never touch someone who is at that level of escalation. They might interpret that as aggressive action. So again, we might say, oh, you know, you can come on. No, you should never touch. You can say, can we come over here and sit down? You know, a lot of people want to get folks out of the situation and handle it outside, and you're just making it a lot worse. So it's again a balance of, it can be uncomfortable, but consistently say the same message too. Can I ask you to reduce to? So when the person was talking yesterday, early on in the conversation, there was these, well, I'm going to do whatever I have to do, whether it's legal or illegal. So I'm hearing that you're going to put yourself in a situation that probably you don't want to be in. You don't want you engaging in anything illegal. How can we support you? We don't want you to get hurt or hurt anybody else. And then he started swearing. And so I said, can I ask you to please lower your voice? That I can communicate maybe a little bit better. I can hear you a little bit better in terms of what you're saying. So try, and you know, and we were fine. He didn't storm out. He did get a little more escalated later, but he was worked up. And so I just tried to stay as calm as possible. I was also in I realized it was a very bad situation. I was behind the desk. He would have had full gain at me. So thinking about that as well, of where you are in something that seems calm, what it might escalate to. That you need to be able to get out. You want both of you to be safe in those situations so that they could walk out and go be angry outside. You could leave and let them be angry in there and still escalate it, right? So it's mostly like you want to clear the room of everybody else, as opposed to, so if something had erupted in here, I would rather keep you here and calm and just be like, Fred, can you have everybody leave so that we're just left here to handle that situation? Which can be hard to do, because especially when you're a group of people tend to feed off of each other as well. Some basic tactics that are going to be helpful is simple listening, distraction, refocusing on the positives. I'm really glad that you came here today. Sounds like we're having some disagreement here. You're not okay with what we're doing. So how can we talk about that? Subject change. Use of humor, you have to be very, very careful with that. And so you wanna be, and use it sparingly, I mean, I'm a humor person. Like, when tough things happen, I'm like, well, here we go, here's what we're gonna do. And really, it works most of the time, I don't use it a great deal in anything like this, but there might be a window in that you could, if someone's getting a smile on their face or something, say, yeah, let's sit down and let's take a minute and let's take a laugh at this. This has gotten to maybe where we're worked up, and then that could help, but you have to be really very sparingly again and very careful. Motivating the other person, no matter what is being said in that moment by that person, they're worked up, there's not clarity, most likely. You're not gonna solve this situation, you're just trying to get them back down and let them know you'll listen to what they have to say. Up here, they're gonna say a ton of things. The other piece is not taking it personally. You might be directed at you, but it's about what's going on with them. And being okay with that, because if you take it, and they may say you've done these things, okay. So how can, and again, when you decide silence can be golden in some situations too, when it's appropriate to talk. So just being there and not, hopefully, like, I can remember there was a situation that I had where a gentleman had escalated at an old job. This has all happened in my former career. And this man was massive, probably 6'5", 350 pounds, a gentle giant, until one day he wasn't. He was angry because he needed to call his mom and she wasn't home. So then he started circling and it was escalated. Everything happened like when I was 25 and 26. And I was just terrified. Like, I didn't know what to do. And so I finally was able to, where he roamed, I got into another room, but didn't have a door, but I called the police and they're like, is this a kid? I was so scared. And my voice sounded like I was about, 10 years old. I'm like, you need it. And I said, cool, it doesn't matter. No, I'm an adult. You need to come here. The police wouldn't even come in the building based on his reputation.
Wow.
Really? They waited outside. Okay. So I had to figure out how to navigate through him. I finally ended up getting out the door that he roamed this way, and I went out and shut the door, and I went around to tell the cops, do something, I'm out, but I don't know how you're gonna get him out. And also wanted me to protect him because he did not need to be arrested. He did not, he was just struggling, right? But they were scared of him because he was so massive, and historically I learned that he had done some things and they didn't know how to handle it. So anyway, so I think, again, really your body movement, what you're gonna do there is important, all while you're having empathy, you're giving choices. So we have some options here. We're gonna do this or do this. Forcing someone to do something will not. Yes, you better get out of here right now. If we're just it's gonna get worse. So what do you want to do right now? Right? What are you saying your options could be? And then thinking through what you have to do. And it may not be following the rules at that moment for where you are, but if we're de-escalating the situation, right? Keeping client safe, keeping you safe. And setting some limits. There are times when you just need to call the police. I think we have this kind of reputation in the helping professions that we're bad people if we call the police. If I came up and hit you, you'd probably call the police, as you should. Our clients don't mean to, but they can't, in some of the challenges they have that come forth, they may be aggravated, but they can't, that's not okay. So how do we navigate when we need to make choices to bring other people in to help us navigate that and then advocate for those we're serving later? You need to be able to communicate clearly. You're not going to talk a lot to the person. You're going to give very deliberate sentences and things, kind of instruction of what you're asking them to do. Barriers to de-escalating are not listening, are criticizing. Well, that's not a very good decision that you're making right now, and I don't think you should do. We're not here to talk about that. Have you ever felt judged before? Probably all of us have. So those we serve know that too. So try not to prejudge someone, and I'm guessing we would name call. I have had professionals do that. You called me, the B word, I can call you. No, we can't, we don't do that. You can call me every name in the book. I'm not gonna call you that back, right? It's not about me. Again, those power struggles, we want to kind of eliminate as well. You don't want to order someone to do something. You'd like to say, I think it might be helpful if we moved over here. Right, or if we walked outside. We threatening, minimizing, arguing, again, whatever their situation is, it's important to them. We can't minimize it. We can say there might be another way we can look at this and sit down and talk about this, as opposed to what we're doing right now. Okay, how are we doing? Oh, gosh, I think we can do it. I get so chatty. Motivational interviewing. Have you guys had any trainings on that?
Yes.
Okay, good. This will be an overview. And I put this here at the end because it kind of wraps up a lot of the things we've talked about for the last almost 2 hours. Thank you for your patience. This is what is going to help us be effective in working with individuals we're serving. So it's client-centered, directive method of enhancing intrinsic motivation to change and by exploring and resolving ambiguity. Several tasks that this involves is engaging through sensitive conversations, right? Again, what folks are bringing to the table a lot of difficult things that we're spending time in. Focus on what's important to the client. Again, they may need housing, but they also might be talking about this other thing that they need, and that might be the priority for them at the moment, even though you're like, housing is really, like, this is important for you too. Really looking at evoking the client's personal motivation for change. So, do you guys work with the stages of change when you're working with your clients? Do you help see where they are from that at all?
Right, that's the thing, they can be in all of them at different times too, and move back and forth.
Yeah, it's not boom, 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 it's not, fluid, and they're gonna,
Yeah.
it is fluid, excuse me, it's not very deliberate, because I can be in pre-contemplation and then jump to, I'm ready to roll, then I go back.
Yeah.
Right? Or and you kind of relapse, if you will. And that's just life. We all do that. Think about change that we've done. I'm bringing 2 Diet Cokes with me today. How many times have I said, okay, I'm off, I'm gonna not drink this anymore. I'm all motivated, I'm doing all this, and then I'm back at it. It's just behavior change can be really hard as well. And this is where we can negotiate plans for our client. Really, when we think about motivational interviewing, the spirit of it is being collaborative, where we're gonna really invoke kind of what we're bringing out of the individual, a respect for autonomy. Again, reminder that, and you know this, but individuals coming to us have probably not had a lot of autonomy, probably not. They've had a lot of closed doors in their time, and we have the opportunity to really respect their autonomy, compassionate, collaborative. I have that. Again, evocative. So evocation is for the education piece. Motivation for change resides with the client. And when you think about autonomy, we're looking at with not having that authority, right? So this is really what we're trying to do it's about a relationship. Motivational interviewing really allows for an in-depth relationship with our clients and allowing them to drive and get motivated. Again, you guys are motivated to get folks what they need. There's no question. It doesn't matter if the individual we're serving isn't motivated. So and my motivation isn't their motivation. So I gotta figure out how to take everything we've talked about and utilize this framework, if you will, to help individuals move along in that change. And it could be a long time, a long time. How long, what is the average time frame you're working with clients?
No more than 90 days usually.
Okay,
The average.
and does that mean in 90 days, what would happen? They get housing? They're done?
Well,
I don't know who said
if they're still homeless, then no, we would be working with them longer. But
Correct.
Once we figure out that we're gonna assist them and, complete an application and get them housed or whatever, we follow them for 90 days.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, they always, can call later on and,
Yeah,
you know.
get support.
but it's Just as a 30, 60, 90 type thing,
Okay,
unless they're in one of our programs that we follow them for up to 2 years.
Yep.
right. So dictated by program at times, right, and what's happening. How about people coming back in, right? They're housed and then they're circling back based on life situations.
Yes,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Where's the? What are they saying when they come in? Are they saying? Are they blaming? I'm trying to ask a question. I'm curious where they're at with, are they understanding that they're struggling and that they want to be getting housed again? And they want supports? Are they saying, you guys didn't help me enough?
No, well, not in my situation. They're usually just, they were doing really, 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 really well, and then a crisis happened.
Yeah, right. So
And
needing
now they're
skills to help.
Kind of back to where, yeah. And they lost their job,
Yeah,
they started using drugs again,
sure.
they aren't taking their mental health medications. Or people came back into their
Yeah.
life and brought them back down,
Absolutely.
or, oh, I gotta help. I got an apartment, so now I'm helping so and so and so and so, and they just start helping everybody else
Yeah.
and forget about
Them.
themselves.
Yeah.
Going,
The good part is they come back,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That they must trust and want to do that. How hard to do that too, when they've done nothing wrong. It's like circumstances we all make choices, but some of these things are not choices when people come back into your life. I mean, it's hard, right? And what individuals are experiencing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them, it seems like the life is coming at me. I haven't had the chance to make a lot of choices in my
Right,
life.
right.
It's all just happened
Mhm,
to
mhm.
me, yeah.
We're gonna stop here. We can definitely chat over lunch if you like, have conversations, then we're gonna do some practical work after lunch. Thank you.
Hey guys, just a couple of notes. If you need gluten-free pizza, it's on the farthest end down here. Please, if you don't, save it for those who do. There's several pizzas out there, pasta. There's also salad in here and there's dessert in the back. So there's kind of food both places, so feel free to, go get lunch. What time do you want them back? You, We got about an hour to lunch, so we'll call you back about an hour. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording while we eat.